Hey guys, first stock I want to look at on our new list is Ciena. Been around a long time. They're like a networking strategy based company. It's pretty diversified. Been around, like I said, for quite a long time. It's a household name in the networking sector, one of the lower tiers. I wouldn't say it's a household, but it wouldn't be compared to a Cisco. Definitely an interesting company. A lot smaller market cap, but some interesting action lately, and I'm going to tell you what I'm looking at just from a psychological perspective. What I've been using for a while, and I haven't adopted it recently, but I'm back towards using it again, is 20 EMA and a 9 EMA. The 4/8s are tight for breakouts and whatnot, directional changes in the short term, but I think if we go with a 29, it's been a little more manageable. So I'm going to start using it again. You can see the short term 9, longer term 20 crossover here back in December of 2015, and we never crossed back over. I would have kept doing the stock. And then you have your downdraft here where you get this huge gap. Obviously, it wasn't something that you could detect, but it started to kind of flatten out a little bit ahead of there. And then we've kind of had some separation here for a while, and we just recently turned up. So this area here is interesting. They came out with some earnings. The earnings were a little bit disappointing. You got a huge drop in the stock, but you started to have this consolidation period. You can see it was under accumulation. No doubt about it. You have a big gap down on heavy volume, but it couldn't hold that lower area. Then you break above. We have two pivots that we're looking at here. You break above this trend line here on this downward pivot, and then you have another angle pivot depending on if you want to go from the lower trend line where you break down or the top of the open candle. So either way, you have two areas that we've breached to the upside, and both pivots are holding now across this line here. You also have the 920 crossover. So I'm going to clean this up and kind of show you what I'm looking at just from a psychological perspective on stock trading here. And June 1st is the earnings, so I want to maybe take a position before that and be willing to add. This whole sector seems to be in a bottoming formation. So I cleaned up the lines a little bit, and I want to show you how I use time for my channels. I actually think this is the channel that we need to be looking at. And stepping back from a longer term perspective, I'll just draw a rough line here, but obviously you can even draw a horizontal line here, but somewhere along this line here, Ciena was in an uptrend, and the big downdraft broke that. You had an attempted rally in here. You put a wick through, so we could even lower this a little bit, but this whole area has probably been some top end resistance for a while, and we're kind of fighting this area. There's a little battle between buyers and sellers. And the reason I'm using these lines here and not going to the tops and the bottoms of the candles is because we always try to use time correlation. It's kind of like a tug of war where guys see the flag kind of pulling to one side and they jump on the one side and pull it back. It's not something that happens instantly, but if you're kind of waiting for a price to hit before you jump in, that's kind of like a bunch of guys on the sidelines watching a tug of war. They see it start to go one way, they jump on and start pulling the rope back the other way. It's not something that happens instantly, but it slowly changes the trend. So just from a psychological perspective, you have a big volume push through here, and you get above the old top candle where you had this big downdraft. So this is definitely accumulation action here. But then the sellers that were stranded here sold into it, and you get a little bit of a downdraft. But the accumulators didn't even want to wait for it to get back down here. They started buying it again. Not only did they buy it, but they pushed it above this consolidation area right to the trend line, or you'd call it like a stranded area for the guys that were caught in the downdraft. So two periods we held above this channel and they couldn't hold it. One day below it, one day on it, and they couldn't hold it. So you're getting this bouncing back and forth of energy, but the energy is starting to move to the upside within the channel. So 2 days below it couldn't hold it, 2 days above it couldn't hold it. Once again, a day above it couldn't hold it. Now we're kind of a little bit below it. But the battle seems to be getting a little bit more bullish, and the bulls are starting to take over slightly. Obviously, June 1st, the earnings are going to have a huge impact on the technicals here. But if we step back and look from another channel, a longer term perspective, I'm going to show you how it looks bullish as well. So here's a 3-year chart. The MACD starting to turn slightly. Obviously, if you go from a pivot, this doesn't have to be perfection, but you can see the channel line basically forming here. Based on a weekly chart, this is kind of neutral, no doubt about it. But I guess we could look at it two ways. If you take a position here, somebody wants in Ciena here long term. They think this thing's starting to turn, it seems. If you did take a position before the earnings, I would say that if the earnings come out negative, I would add to it depending on where we end up technically. We can keep that in mind and kind of gauge where it goes based on the news and you know where we're at on a technical perspective on a 1-year chart. But this is an interesting one to keep an eye on, no doubt about it. And I like that it's starting to turn up in not only a short term but a very longer term perspective. And here we are adding the Bollinger Band, attacking the mid Bollinger Band, right on it here. So you know, push through it, and we're looking at 26s. I actually think this can get up closer to 28 over a longer period of time. But same turn up here that we were looking at before, the 3-year weekly. And once we get across that mid Bollinger Band, you're going to probably start to work inside this gap on the downdraft where we had the 90 cross over to the bearish side. So is this going to be a momentum stock? It could be. If the earnings come out slightly positive, I think you're going to see a lot of people jump on this and push it up to the 26 area. If the earnings aren't great, I actually think you might have like an ACIA type situation where you get a drop and some consolidation, then a pushback higher. And that's going to bring me to our next stock that we've talked about for a while, and I don't want to give up on yet, is ACIA. Before I exit and look at ACIA, I want to show you the 10-year chart on Ciena. The stock's been around a while, no doubt about it that it's nothing you really have to worry about, a complete catastrophe or collapse. This is a very long consolidation channel on this stock. It goes way back to 2009. Probably a buyout candidate at some point if things don't work out for the company from a growth perspective, but you can see this channel on a monthly kind of pushed up above there and couldn't hold it, but now we're attacking it again. So definitely at a crossroads here in Ciena. Should be interesting if we push through this line where it can go to quite a bit of green sky here, in my opinion. I don't really want to gauge this from a horizontal technical perspective, but 28 would be an area that if we get across, there's a lot of room, probably up into the 32, 33 area. Don't want to get ahead of ourselves here, though. So let's take a look at ACIA next.